नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं दैवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत् नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तम श्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्ठिकी हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। जय श्री गुरुदेव की जय, श्री प्रभुपाद की जय, श्री श्री राधा गोविंद भगवान की जय, निताय गौर प्रेमानंदी, हरे हरि बोल। So welcome everyone. So today we are going to start Nectar by Instruction text 2. So I think it's been quite a few weeks. There has been gap. So I think better we should start actually, by reciting the text 1, and then we'll actually go on to the text 2. So normally I think we will follow this pattern as we actually study the verses. So we always go back and just recite, recite the verse and actually recite the translation. And then we can actually start with the verse that we're studying. So we can actually, because of a limitation of time, we can do it together rather than actually I'm going around the table. First one. Vacho vegam manasako devegam jiva vegam udarupasta vegam etan vegan yo vishyeta dhiraha sarvamapi mam prithvim tasisha. Vacho vegam manasah krodha vegam jiva vegam udarupasta vegam etan vegan yo vishyeta dhiraha sarvamapi mam prithvim tasisha. Translation by Prabhu ki jai. A sober person who can tolerate the urge to speak, the mind's demands, the actions of anger, and the urges of the tongue, belly, and genitals is qualified to make disciples all over the world. Okay. So now we'll move on to the text 2. So do you, all of you have the book, Nectar of Instruction book, or do you want me to share a screen?
Prabhuji, we have the link of the website. So
okay, I think better I will share the screen. Let me check if I can able to do that. Then, okay. Can you see that? Right.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Nectar of Instruction, text 2. So we will actually start before we actually sing the verse. I think we'll just go by word by word.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Prabhu, can you zoom in a bit if possible?
Zoom in. Let me check if I can do that. Is that better?
Yes, thank you, Prabhu.
Okay. Atyaharaha. And you can just repeat after me. Atyaharaha. Prayashascha. Prajalpo. Niyamagraha. Jana Sangascha. Laulamcha. Shadbir. Bhaktir. Vinashati. So, Atyaharaha Prajalpo Niyamagraha Jana Sangascha Laulamcha Shadbir Bhaktir Vinashati. So you can just recite after me. Atyaharaha Prayashascha Prajalpo Niyamagraha Jana Sangascha Laulamcha Shadbir Bhaktir Vinashati. Atyaharaha Prayashascha Prajalpo Niyamagraha Jana Sangascha Laulamcha Shadbir Bhaktir Vinashati. Okay. Now we'll just go around the table. Maybe start with the bench Mataji.
Yes, Prabhuji. Actually, I'm not familiar with this tune because I used to sing in a different tune earlier. That's why.
Okay.
Atyaharah prayasascha prajalpo niyamagraha jana sangascha nalyam cha shadbhir bhaktir vinashyati.
Okay. Parth Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu. In the same tune, Prabhu. That Mata.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Atyaharah prayasascha prajalpo niyamagraha jana sangascha lolyam cha sadbhir bhakti vinashyati.
Yeah. Is Mayuresh there? I can't see everyone on the screen. No. How about who else in the intermediate class? So we have some absenteeism, I guess, today. Soumya Mataji is there?
Can I see?
Yes.
Atyaharah prayasascha prajalpo niyamagrahah jana sangascha lovyam cha shadbir bhaktir vinashyati.
Okay. So we'll do the now word-to-word synonyms. Can you still able to see it? It's too small. Is that okay? Okay. For word-to-word synonyms and translation purport, Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So, ati ahara, overeating or too much collecting. Prayasaha, over endeavoring. Cha, and. Prajalpaha, idle talking. Niyama, rules and regulations. Agrahaha, too much attachment to, or agrahaha, too much neglect of. Jana sangaha, association with worldly minded persons. Cha, and. Laulyam, ardent longing or greed. Cha, and. Shadbihi, by these six. Bhaktihi, devotional service. Vinashyati, is destroyed. So, overeating or too much collecting, over endeavoring, and idle talking, rules and regulations, too much attachment to, or too much neglect of, association with worldly minded persons, and ardent longing or greed, and by these six, devotional service is destroyed. So we will come to the translation. Anyone? I need a volunteer to read. Maybe Divyansh or Path
I can read.
Okay. Thank you, Mataji.
One's devotional service is spoiled when he becomes too entangled in the following six activities: eating more than necessary or collecting more funds than required, over endeavoring for mundane things that are very difficult to obtain. Third, talking unnecessarily about mundane subject matters. Fourth, practicing the scriptural rules and regulations only for the sake of following them and not for the sake of spiritual advancement, or rejecting the rules and regulations of the scriptures and working independently or whimsically. Fifth, associating with worldly minded persons who are not interested in Krishna consciousness. And sixth, being greedy for mundane achievements.
So the translation actually means is very straightforward actually. Actually the six activities that are mentioned here. So this is actually sort of continuation from the first verse where we actually, His Grace Sanjay Prabhu discussed about the actually senses and their demands and how to control them. And here actually, Srila Rupa Goswami actually telling us that actually these are the 6 things that actually one should avoid, if they actually want to progress on this path of actually self-realization or bhakti yoga. So this is very important verse, and actually if one want to actually progress on this path and become a pure devotee, actually he must actually adhere to these instructions. So by actually neglecting any of these, there is very little chance that he can able to achieve that actually in the top goal of becoming attaining the pure prem for Lord Krishna. So these things actually sounds, if you look at it, actually each one of them, actually before we go on to the purport, which actually Srila Prabhupada has given a very elaborate purport on this verse, actually describing each and everything in very detail. So here the first one is eating more than necessary or collecting more fund than required. So this is quite obvious, So in the first verse, actually the text 1 also talks about the senses, the tongue and belly, So this is very relevant here. So atyahar is actually not only means actually eating, ahar, but it's actually anything that actually in relation to all the 5 senses, So anything we overdo is not actually acceptable. We will actually discuss that in very detail as we go. So the over endeavoring, that is a prayas, for the mundane things, so it's a materialistic things, which are very difficult to obtain. So this could also actually can become an obstacle in one's progress. And the third one, talking unnecessarily about mundane subject matter. So that is what we call prajalp here. So by actually indulging in prajalp or actually talking about unnecessary things also, waste one's valuable time and actually can also, affect one's consciousness, So it is also one of the obstacle in the progress. The fourth one is practicing scriptural rules and regulation only for the sake of following them and not for the sake of spiritual advancement, or rejecting the rules and regulation of scriptures and working independently or whimsically. So this is very interesting, actually, nimagraha, it has a twofold meaning here, actually. Means one is actually advised to follow all the scriptural rules, all the niyams, and prescriptions and prohibitions, So you already heard that actually 5 are actually 4 regulative principles. So these are also the niyams that one has to actually follow in the initial stages so they can actually progress, in bhakti yoga. So actually we follow not just sake of following them, but actually the real aim should be actually by following these rules and regulation, actually we should aspire that we should actually progress by using, by following these rules and regulations. So that should be the objective, and not just, we're just following because we have been told to follow. And actually we are just stuck at the same stage, and there is no progress. This also can become an impediment. And sometimes some people, they just reject the rules and regulation, and they actually, form their own rules and regulation and they act accordingly. So this is certainly an obstacle. They will never able to progress. So, and the fifth one, associating with the worldly minded persons who are not interested in Krishna consciousness. So this is a janasangha. So it's an association part, with whom we associate. So we had to choose the right association in order to actually progress. And the sixth one is being greedy for mundane achievements. So obviously it's a greed, and that can also lead into the envy and actually anger, if those actually, desires are not met. So this is certainly an obstacle. So all the 6 things, that can actually withhold who actually desire to progress on the devotional path. So we will begin with the purport, but before we go on, if anyone has any questions on the actually just the translation, means I suppose you have all read the actually this verse and the purport given by Srila Prabhupada. Everything is clear for everyone here? Okay, we'll progress then with the purport. Okay, Divanshi Mataji, you can continue now.
Yes, Prabhuji. Human life is meant for plain living and high thinking. Since all conditioned living beings are under the control of the Lord's third energy, this material world is designed so that one is obliged to work. The Supreme Personality of Godhead has three primary energies or potencies. The first is called Antaranga Shakti, or the internal potency. The second is called Tathastha Shakti, or the marginal potency. The third is called Bahiranga Shakti, or the external potency. The living entities constitute the marginal potency, and they are situated between the internal and external potencies. Being subordinate as eternal servants of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Jivatmas, or atomic living entities, must remain under the control of either the internal or external potency. When they are under the control of the internal potency, they display their natural constitutional activity, namely constant engagement in the devotional service of the Lord. This is stated in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 9, verse 13. Mahatmanastu mam partham devim prakritimashritaha bhajanti ananyamanaso Natva bhutadimavyayam. O son of Pritha, those who are not deluded, the great souls are under the protection of the divine nature. They are fully engaged in devotional service because they know me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, original and inexhaustible.
Okay, just we'll stop here. So in the purport now, Srila Prabhupada start with this, actually the first statement. The human life is meant for plain living and high thinking. So, looking at this, Srila Prabhupada basically actually summed up the entire purport into a single statement at the beginning. And that is actually by following these 6 instructions, as we read the translation. Actually, if we're able to implement this instruction, automatically our life will become very simple. And this instruction of actually plain living and high thinking. So what does that mean actually, the plain living and high thinking? So the plain living means actually as this actually translation says, actually, one has to actually lead a very simple life, one should only accept, what is actually necessary to maintain the body and soul together. That is what actually Srila Prabhupada says further in the purport, So actually only actually accepting a simple prasad, which is offered to Lord Krishna, or wearing simple clothes. And also not just these actually only outward things, but actually high thinking, so one has to be very straightforward in his dealings. So these are the all qualities of actually good devotee, And when we say about high thinking, and if one is aspire to actually progress in Bhakti Yoga process, then the first thing that Srila Prabhupada always mentioned, that actually, the intelligent human being will always inquire, Aham Brahmasmi, who he is and what is his relationship with the super soul or Paramatma. So one who inquire about actually who he is, he's a spirit soul, and he's not this body, and there is actually Supreme Personality of Godhead. And what is his relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead? And then actually, as one actually, studies the scriptures, like Srimad Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, then one will understand all the actually prescription given in these scriptures, how to do a sense control. What does this mean by actually Mahatma? What does this mean by the Duratma? As actually Srila Prabhupada is discussed this point as we read the purport. So actually leading a simple lifestyle, and actually where Srila Prabhupada is saying a high thinking, actually rather than one focusing on actually achieving mundane things, one should actually inquire about these important elements of actually, Aham Brahmasmi, who's actually, what is Atma and what is Paramatma and what is the relationship and what is the aim of one's, what is the one's aim in this life, So this is actually what means I understood by this statement, that actually human life is meant for plain living and high thinking. And here Srila Prabhupada actually describing the three potencies of the Lord. That is the Antaranga Shakti, which is the internal potency, which is actually manifested as Srimati Radharani. And the second one is the Tathas Shakti, the marginal potency. So all the living entities is actually belong to this marginal potency. And the third one is the Bahirang Shakti, which is external potency or Mahamaya, as we call the Maya Devi, most commonly known word. So these three potencies and all the Jivatmas or atomic living entities, as Srila Prabhupada call it, they always, they can actually under the protection of internal potency or external potency, depending on actually if they are actually, aspire to become a devotee or they have already achieved the goal of become a pure devotee. So pure devotees are normally, they are under the protection of internal potency. And in this material world, majority of the Jivatmas, who are actually not on this path of perfection, as Srila Prabhupada called as Duratmas, they are always under the control of Mahamaya. So that is the external potency. So here in Srila Prabhupada referring to Bhagavad Gita verse, chapter 9, verse 13, which is actually basically explaining the actually position of the Mahatmas. Mahatmanastu mam partha daivim prakritim ashrita bhajanti ananya manaso nyatva bhutadim avyayam. So the son of Pritha, those who are not deluded, the great soul, are under the protection of divine nature, and they are fully engaged in devotional service because they know me as Supreme Personality of Godhead, original and inexhaustible. So this is the actually position of the Mahatmas. Whereas for actually ordinary living entities like us, here Srila Prabhupada made a statement that this material world is designed so that one is obliged to work. So what does that mean? Actually, one is obliged to work. So there is obligation to work, for everyone. One cannot escape that. And Srila Prabhupada actually, I was listening to Srila Prabhupada to one of the Srimad Bhagavatam verse, which is actually referred further in this purport. That is Canto 1, Chapter 2, verse 9 here. Dharmasya hi apavargasya nartho arthayopakalpate narthasya dharmaya kantasya kamo labaya hismitaha. So here in this verse, apavargasya word is very important. So this in Sanskrit linguistic, there is a word pavarg, and the meaning of the pavarg actually Srila Prabhupada very nicely explained in one of his lecture, on this verse. The pavarg means actually is broken down into pa pa bha pa pa ba ba ma. So pa means actually parishram. In this material world, everyone has to work very hard, to earn the living. One has to work like a donkey, the ass is what they call it, One has to do very hard work. That actually the next word is fur. Fur means phenila. And the meaning of the phenila means it's a foam, So you may have seen it actually, the farm animals, like a bull, when they're actually made to work in the field, pulling the plow or something like that. So it's very laborious task, and when they have to work like that in sun and rain, actually the foam that comes out of their mouth. So that is meaning of the actually phenila. And the position of the living entities is also like that in this material world. Actually the materialistic people, who are actually in order to actually, because they always want to enjoy this materialistic thing with their senses, and in order to actually earn the money, so they have the enough money to spend on this sense gratification. They work very hard, and Srila Prabhupada says that they work very hard that they actually foam is coming out of their mouth. And the third syllable is pa, fa, bha. So bha means vyartharth, frustration. So even working so hard, try to actually satisfy their senses in this material world, still frustration again, everyone feels a frustration, they never satisfied by running after, satisfying their senses. So there is no satisfaction. And the fourth one, pa, fa, bha, bha. Bha means bhai. So even actually working very hard and accumulating all this wealth, and different materialistic possessions, there is always a fear of losing them. So because they are very much attached to what they have earned, or they are very much attached to their position, and different designations as well. They're always in actually anxiety about how to maintain these things, or they're always worried, what if they lose these things, So bhai is always there. Bhai means fear. And last one is the pa, pa, bha, ba, ma. Ma means mrityu. So even doing all this, working very hard and try to maintain their position, spending whole their life trying to earn money and acquire all this possession, in the end, they cannot avoid the death, death still comes. And at death, as Krishna says, he takes everything away. Mrityu sarva harasya chaham. So this is very sad situation of all the living entities, who are under the control of Mahamaya, and these actually 5 things that Srila Prabhupada described, they are called 5 miseries of this material existence. And the verse that I actually, Srila Prabhupada mentioned here, dharmasya apavargasya. So instruction given in this verse, how to actually, what they call it, how to mitigate these 5 material miseries. So we will actually discuss that later in the purport. So coming back to the what we're discussing is one is obliged to work. Even Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that there is no one in this material existence that he cannot refrain from doing anything for even a single moment. Everyone has to work, and all the material arrangement are like that one has to work very hard. And by nature, actually, it is said that people who are only focused on this materialistic thing or sense enjoyment, even if they work hard, there is no satisfaction, as I said, and Krishna fulfill their desire to work hard. So if you want to work hard, Krishna will create all the opportunities for you that you will be working even harder and harder day by day. So there is no relief. So Srila Prabhupada says that you will work like a donkey 24/7. So that is the actually position of the living entities who's under the clutches of this Mahamaya. And so Mahatmas here actually, the Bhagavad Gita verse 9.13 here in the translation, it is mentioned, O son of Pritha, those who are not deluded, the great souls are under the protection of the divine nature. So the great souls, they are not deluded, but we the rest of the souls, the ordinary living entities, they are always under delusion. So if you look Okay, trying to get my notes. Just a minute. So it says that anyone who do not believe in God is called delusional because he believes in something that is not true. So, they're always under illusion or delusion, whatever you call it. So even the scientists, they are also, deluded because they do not believe in God, and they believe in something that is merely a illusion, in this material world. So, okay, we'll just continue with the purport, and then we'll discuss the actual concept of Mahatma and Duratma. Okay.
Yes, Prabhuji. The word Mahatma refers to those who are broad-minded, not triple-minded. Triple-minded persons, always engaged in satisfying their senses, sometimes expand their activities in order to do good for others through some ism, like nationalism, humanitarianism, or altruism. They may reject personal sense gratification for the sense gratification of others, like the members of their family, community, or society, either national or international. Actually, all this is extended sense gratification, from personal to communal to social. This may all be very good from the material point of view, but such activities have no spiritual value. The basis of such activity is sense gratification, either personal or extended. Only when a person gratifies the senses of the Supreme Lord can he be called a Mahatma or broad-minded person. In the above quoted verse from Bhagavad Gita, the words Daivim Prakritim refer to the control of the internal potency or pleasure potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This pleasure potency is manifested as Srimati Radharani or her expansion Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune. When the individual Jeev souls are under the control of the internal energy, their only engagement is the satisfaction of Krishna or Vishnu. This is the position of a Mahatma. If one is not a Mahatma, he is a Duratma or a cripple-minded person. Such mentally crippled Duratmas are put under the control of the Lord's external potency, Mahamaya.
Okay. So here, actually, Srila Prabhupada very beautifully summarized, what is the Mahatma and the Duratma. So Mahatmas refer here as a broad-minded person, and their only business is to serve the senses of Lord, they're actually always, as Srila Prabhupada says, they're 24/7 engaged in actually serving the Lord, and they engage all their senses in the service of the Lord. And they are called Mahatmas. While as Duratmas, the ordinary living entities, they're always engaged in satisfying their own senses, So that's why we are very much attached to enjoying all these materialistic things, with all our senses, we always want to enjoy. And sometimes Prabhupada says that actually, this was something actually found it very interesting, when first time I studied this verse, that sometimes they expand their activities in order to do good for others through some ism, nationalism, humanitarianism, altruism, So there are different isms, you may have all heard it. And so for most of the people, this sound very actually, it's like a feel-good kind of, things to do for others. But Srila Prabhupada says that there is no any spiritual value in these activities. Actually, this is called extended self-gratification. So this is actually new concept, So one may be a little bit detached, he may not be very much interested in satisfying his senses, but is very much attached to his followers, So if you are actually family head or, you have a grandfather, you are actually very much concerned about giving, meeting the demands of your actually grandchildren. So if you are actually a leader in a community or a politician, then actually you are concerned about actually providing the needs of the all the citizens, who's actually following you. Or some are actually doing this altruistic activities, actually building hospitals or, doing the free food distribution. So we have very actually detailed discussion on this point in our beginners program. I know where actually Amrish Poo posted, actually one post, it was relating to this topic, and actually everybody expressed their view, what they think about if there is any actually spiritual value, by doing these things, just distributing food, free food. I'm not talking about prasadam, just a free food. That a lot of organizations, even in the India or even in Western countries, you see, they are actually distributing food. So it may not be it is definitely not prasad. They even distribute meat and other stuff. But actually, by doing things or building hospitals or building schools, so it may be actually gives a good karma, depending on what activity you are doing. But by doing so, you are not actually progress spiritually. You get a good karma, maybe as a result of that. As Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, you may get a better birth in the next life. You may be elevated to heavenly planets. But still, that is a material world, and still you are actually again subjected to this actually janma mrityu jara vyadhi. It still exists there as well. So there is no spiritual progress. So there is no spiritual value in these activities, and that's why Srila Prabhupada says that the basis of such activity is still the sense gratification. So this is a point actually we have to understand by actually engaging in these actually activities like being a nationalist or doing humanitarian activities or altruistic activities. There is actually no gain. Spiritually there is no gain. So that one point actually stands out here. But when person gratifies the senses of Supreme Lord, can be called a Mahatma or broad-minded person. And Duratma is called cripple-minded. So he's only actually concerned about himself or his dependents. So he's, by doing such activities, you are again actually getting entangled in this materialistic, there's again, birth and death, and it goes on perpetually in this cycle, and there's no actually real progress to get out of this material world. So that's why Srila Prabhupada says that there is no any spiritual value in doing such activities. And in the second para, actually, again, Srila Prabhupada expanded on this point of actually the internal potency of the Lord. Daivim Prakritim refers to control of internal potency, the pleasure potency of Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that pleasure potency is manifested as Srimati Radharani, or her expansion, Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune. So is that clear to you, to all of you, or do you have any questions on this point? Or is there something new? Has not come into discussion before?
When you ask questions, just stop the sharing so we can see the devotees.
Stop the sharing.
You think it's a good idea?
Yeah, I think, yeah, I'd only see few cases, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
show the
Hare
faces
Krishna,
also.
Prabhuji. I just had a small question. We've discussed this point before as well. Just wanted to ask that in the purport, Prabhupada writes that, just 1 second, something about that, even if you're gratifying the senses of the members of your family, it's extended sense gratification, right? So my question is that we always emphasize on, that the members of your family, your parents, and your basically your close members of the family, they should be satisfied with whatever you're doing, and that you're supposed to fulfill their requirements, or basically do those duties responsibly, right? To ensure that they don't get basically to not disrupt their lives in any manner, shape, or form. So my question is that how do we distinguish these two things? That I mean, there can be a distinction. I just wanted to understand that how can we basically that we're not doing things to gratify their senses, and at the same time we're doing the things that they want us to do out of a sense of responsibility. Like, how do we distinguish between these two things? Is my question ambiguous? Or does it make sense?
Okay, I understand your question. Actually, means yeah. What you're asking is how to distinguish, actually.
Yeah, so
actually,
my question is, where do we draw the line between acting responsibly towards your family members and gratifying their senses or extended sense gratification?
So what I understood by your question is, means the point Prabhupada is making here in that actually paragraph what you discussed is actually by doing such activities, there is no spiritual progress, by meeting the demands of your dependents. So it could be your family members, or if you're leader, and they could be your followers. So actually providing to their needs is not going to actually help you progress spiritually for yourself, and for them as well. They're not going to progress spiritually unless you actually do these activities in such a way that actually all the activities that you do, is actually directed towards serving the Lord. So if you are yourself a devotee, then actually by cooking, and offering the food to Krishna, and then giving that food to your family members or to your followers, and if they actually accept that, honor that prasad, then there is a chance of spiritual progress, because by accepting the mercy of a Lord, there is a chance, because when you eat prasad, there is not a chance, actually, that is fact. And this wrong word what I use. So by accepting the prasad, Srila Prabhupada explained this in Srimad Bhagavad Gita. By actually eating prasad, it will help to purify your body, and eventually it will purify the finer tissues in your brain, and because of that, then one can think of a nivritti marg, So nivritti marg is basically the path of renunciation, One can actually make a start on that path. But by accepting just, ordinary food, prepared just to satisfy your senses, you're just actually getting more and more entangled in this materialistic way of life, because, Krishna says that, if you're not actually offering, and you're just eating the food, cooking and eating for your own satisfaction, then you are verily eating the sin. So you are actually accumulating the sin. So Srila Prabhupada is not saying that do not actually care for your family or do not meet their demands. So Srila Prabhupada is saying that by doing these things, devoid of devotional service, you're not progressing spiritually. You are getting more and more entangled. So that's why even you are actually father or mother, so one of your responsibility is that actually you have to actually train them in such a way, or doing all these things, because as a spirit soul, you cannot choose to, you cannot stop acting. You have to work, that's your duty. You have to take care of them. But if you actually do these activities or center all these activities in such a way that actually, you are serving the Lord, you are getting everybody engaged in service of the Lord, then you are actually progressing. So there is not much difference between the activities that we do as a devotee or want to become a devotee, or the ordinary materialistic person. He does the same things, but he's not following the rules and regulations. He also work, he also cook, he also eat, he also maybe donating it. And devotees also do similar things, but we are actually doing it by actually following the scriptural injunction. And by doing that, similar activities, we get the benefit of actually accepting the prasad. So it may be actually the food offered to Krishna. If we are actually training them, encouraging them to engage in devotional service, that way they are also spiritually progressing, we are also progressing. But like a cripple-minded person that Srila Prabhupada refers, who's only concerned about satisfying his senses and his dependent senses, they are going to get more and more entangled. So that is actually the understanding, and so what I actually realized. So is that answers your question, Devansh Mataji?
Yes, Prabhu. Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Sure. Or
yes, yes.
yeah. Yeah. I think just timeline. I think it's 4:46 now. So maybe it's Amrish Prabhu actually means if you want to actually expand on that point, would be really nice. Actually, if I miss, I always miss points. So
No, good point, Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for a nice explanation. I have a question. So what happens to devotees who are new and old and whose seniors in the family, they don't follow Krishna consciousness? They can't influence that. So
Sorry.
just responding this point with Devanshu Mataji, that all those devotees whose seniors, the family, their parents or their uncles and aunties or grandparents, they don't follow Krishna consciousness. So how does that progress with your answer? Just expanding.
How they progress? So you are a devotee, but they are not devotee. That's what you're saying?
Yes, and you can, like your answer was where you can influence them, like your dependents. You can influence them, but what you are dependent, and what they do not follow. So how do you do? What do you do?
Or if they don't follow, okay. Actually means if you are actually dependent, so it may be your children or your followers, and if they're actually not following your instruction that are actually spiritually inclined, then actually means you can just keep doing things, if you are a devotee. So you should stay engaged, you should focus on what you're doing. But actually you can you can offer things to Krishna, and you can actually share the food with them, even they are actually do not want to actually take this path of Krishna consciousness seriously, or if they do not want to chant or do not want to do things or devotional services, at least they can have the actually prasad, and prasad, feed them a prasad. So Srila Prabhupada says that prasad will work slowly, actually it will have its effect over time. So sometime actually means I also seen this video a long time ago, where actually some people who used to come to see Prabhupada, but they are not very much spiritually inclined, and they try to actually ask challenging questions and something like that. So Srila Prabhupada just used to stop them and just ask devotees to just give them some prasad or rasgullas, and so maybe prasad will actually make a difference, but you cannot really obviously force them if they do not want to do it. But if you become very serious, and if you actually doing things as actually been advised, then eventually the prasad is one thing, definitely have its effects, but you can because of your association, you can always be hopeful that they will be actually get influence over time, because this material world is very actually, it's not a very it's not a palatable situation all the time. People think that they are enjoying, but time will come, then they will actually learn by their mistakes. Everybody suffers, and when they are in difficulty, then they will come to you. They will see how nicely you are following and how actually satisfied you are. So that is my understanding, Prabhuji. That's a way to influence them.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. Is this what Devanshu Mata was asking? Will answer your question.
Yes, Prabhuji, to some extent. Actually, my question was more about that. How do we draw that line in between responsibly acting towards your family members and gratifying their senses? Because that was, I needed clarification on that. I've received some amount of clarification on that. The devotees and worldly minded people, even though they're doing the same thing, they're doing it out of different consciousness. But yeah, that was the question.
You want to say something, Prabhuji?
It's frozen, so you can continue. I don't know what's happening. Okay, go ahead, please.
So, okay. So because of actually the time is 4:51, Prabhuji, this is time to stop, isn't it, for our next class? Or should we continue until 6? I think we cannot hear you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. I think Parth Prabhu raised the hand. So.
Oh, Prabhu. Okay. Prabhuji, do you have any question?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. So are we continuing, Prabhu, or should like just?
I think, yeah, if you have any burning question, we can continue. I think we still have 10 minutes. Yeah.
Yes, Prabhu. I just wanted some clarification on like niyamagrahi or niyamagraha. So like initially, because at least I do things for like following them, because when you start in bhakti, you don't know. So how do we basically have the mindset of spiritual advancement while following some rules? Like I follow them because there are rules. Like I don't eat chocolate because I know it's a rule not to eat chocolate. So that's, I stick with it. So how do I maybe, let's say, take this rule of eating chocolate or not eating onion and garlic to be my spiritual advancement and not just for the sake of following?
I think this point actually it will, I mean, there is a plan to discuss this point. Actually, I'm going to go through each point like Atyahar, Prayas, Niyamagraha. So all this point will be discussed in detail as we go. But actually, because you asked the question, actually means you want a clarification that by following these rules, means you're just not following for the sake of following them, isn't it? So actually means all these actually regulative principles, not the 4 regulative principles we follow. So the purpose of the following this principle that actually it will, actually help us to actually get us into mode of goodness anyway. And actually it will help us to progress on this path. But actually we should actually follow all these things, and we should be very much aware that actually we are doing all these things. We are conducting all these austerities. So the main purpose is to actually, that will help us progress on the devotional path, because sometimes you see the devotees are actually following these rules and regulation for many years, but there is no any real progress, by philosophically, by their understanding. If they're not studying scripture, they're not contemplating on these points, and if they're not making any efforts to actually implement this instruction in their actually real life. So there is no progress, you're just actually following. It's just like become a ritual, You wake up early in the morning, you do puja, you do follow these principles, and you again do puja, and you go on with your life, but you're not progressing, But in your program, if you see, actually, Ambrish Prabhu, is always insist on everyone should actually read, study, and actually we should be actually making progress, It should be reflected in your chanting. Your chanting should be, the intensity in the chanting should actually increase, There should be less disturbances. So you should monitor the progress yourself, So the very actually aim of this actually regulative principle is to actually help one to progress in this path, So by not eating chocolate, not eating tea and coffee. So basically you're avoiding all these intoxicants, So basically it should help you to focus, when you chant, You should not create much disturbance. It's of actually following these austerities. But if you're not progressing, then actually you are just stuck at the same point. But we will discuss this in detail, Prabhuji, actually, in Niyamagraha. So it is just not around those points. There are many different points that actually come under that umbrella. So maybe next week, actually, once we actually discuss the Atyahar, Prayas, and then Niyamagraha will come there, and we will have a proper actually discourse on that point, and we'll revisit that. Yeah.
Thank you, bro.
Anyone else has any questions? Or Ambrish Prabhu, you want to add any points to that? Okay.
It's very nice. I mean, I can do when at the end, if you want me to say something at the end of your sessions, No problem. Thank you. Please continue.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Yes, Prabhuji, I had a question. It's about the translation. On the fifth point, it is said that associating with worldly minded persons who are not interested in Krishna consciousness. So, Prabhuji, usually, like how my question is actually that in the real world, like especially if your family or anyone who is close to you is not that Krishna conscious, and usually the majority, in fact, mostly people that you're meeting with or you're talking to, or you're conversing with in your job, your college, or even in the hostel, which is the other time, and even with your family, no one is Krishna consciousness. So majority of your association is actually with people who are not interested in Krishna consciousness. So how should we deal with such kind of a situation?
Yeah, so again, the same point actually means, yeah, definitely we're going to spend a lot of time on this point again when we can come to the point of Jana Sanghasha, how to deal with this type of situation. I know actually this question is going to come because we live in the world where actually majority of people are not non-devotees, so you're dealing with them pretty much every moment, and especially family as well, as you pointed out. So here actually means association make a big difference. If you are associating with the devotees, especially pure devotees, it can change your entire life, in a positive way. But if you're associating with the non-devotees, then it can have a influence on your progress as well. So choosing the association is very important. But what I learned all these years is that yes, we do associate with actually non-devotees, but that is very important that actually we should make every attempt to have the association with the devotees or have the association with the Srila Prabhupada's books, So Srila Prabhupada is pure devotee. So we should read his books on daily basis, So we are always associating. And Amrish Prabhu also taught us this thing that actually you are always going to be in this situation. So, and also especially when you are going to preach, you're preaching business. So you cannot say that you're not going to talk to the non-devotees. So if that is the case, to whom you're going to preach? So you have to preach, So in order to preach, you have to talk to them. And even in the beginning, sometimes you even have to talk some mundane things as well in order to actually get their attention and get them engaged. But the point is we give association, we give our association to them. We do not take their association. So the point is like to give a simple example is the Srila Prabhupada actually when he went to the America, first time. So initially he lived in between the hippies, who used to actually eat meat, used to drink, used to take drugs, and used to do all the abominable things, that a devotee should not do. But even actually surrounded by all the hippies, Srila Prabhupada didn't change. He did not get influence at all because he was very firm in his sadhana, in his bhakti. And he knows that actually he was very sure. And he said that actually he actually went there to teach them things, and not to actually learn from them. So this is actually difference between giving and actually taking the association. So it's a very challenging for a new devotee initially. Means I struggle with this point very much initially as well. But if you're actually coming to this program regularly, you're associating with like-minded persons, you're reading books. So that will always give you strength, and you're chanting daily. So chanting is also association, you're associating directly with Krishna, through the sound medium. So all these actually things will always give you strength. So when you're dealing with these things, you know what are the rules, what are the regulations, what you're supposed to do. So if you have the firm conviction in these things, you should not be actually influenced by what things they are doing, So it's always, I know actually, you always get carried away sometime, but you can always come back again to the programs, reading books, and that should actually bring you back on the track again. So, and once you become, very much advanced and when you start preaching, then these things will not affect you. Actually, that these people are always going to be like that, but our business is to actually give association. So once you learn this point, then I think it becomes very natural, because you are not going to run away from all these materialistic people. And actually some of your family members is not going to be devotees, but you still respect them, but you carry on, what you do. But do not actually try to get influenced by them. So that is a point, but we'll discuss this in in detail again. Is that good enough, Mataji?
Yes, Prabhuji.
All right, now it's time for the next class. So we should conclude today and we'll carry on next week. Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Hare Krishna.